Chapter 9 of the third book is called Final. But I think that it's a bit of a misconception to say that this is a true note of finality that Dickens adds to the story. Much like Atonement, there is an element of resolution, but in some ways that does feel a bit false, as both Dickens and McEwan end on a slightly uncertain note that fits in very well with the themes of both novels. The first half of the chapter basically is bound to be getting rid of Mrs. Sparsit, telling her to go and live with her relations, and just sort of banishing her from the house. So again, ultimately, it's a woman who he's got rid of. Bounderby's done the same thing to his mother, he's done the same thing to Louisa and silenced her, and now it's Mrs. Sparsit who's going. On page 272, just before the halfway point, we're told that Mrs. Sparsit surveyed him fixedly from head to foot, swept disdainfully past him and ascended the staircase. So Dickens adds that ironic reference there to the staircase. Remember, she saw Louisa going down the staircase. Now Mrs. Sparsit is going up it, but it's only to leave. So Dickens is sort of criticising and mocking her sort of superior position as she's sort of looking down on everyone else. But the only reason she's so high is because she's having to ascend the staircase to be kicked out. And then straight after that, we're told Mr. Bounderby closed the door and stood before the fire, projecting himself after his old explosive manner into his portrait and into futurity. So it ends with Bounderby standing in front of a fire, and that's been an ongoing image all through the text. We've been told about the fact that Louisa has been staring into the fire, and the ashes in the fire represent a lost youth. So it's Bounderby staring into these ashes again. Bounderby obviously represents the wasted youth and represents the wasted childhood. But I think the fact that he's there looking forward into the future is Dickens' point coming back again. Remember, this chapter, this book, is called Garnering. Garnering happens in autumn, there's still winter to come. And so Bounderby looking into the future, Dickens is sort of saying, well, Bounderby's version of the future is going to be dark, it's going to be even worse if these utilitarianists can sort of keep going. Bounderby imagines a future, and we're told right at the bottom of page 272, had he any prescience of the day, 5 years to come, when Josiah Bounderby of Coketown was to die in a fit in the Coketown street, and this same precious will was to begin its long career of quibble, plunder, false pretences, vile example, little service and much love. Probably not, yet the portrait was to see it all out. Bounderby's not long for this world, he's not got long left. Just in the same way that Gradgrind's been bowed down and weakened as the book's gone on, same thing there is happening to Bounderby. Dickens is quite happily sort of killing him off. And the point being that his will ends up in the same sort of squabble and the same lack of resolution is Dickens' point that utilitarianism is not the answer. When people are entirely looking out for themselves, it will only end in a quibble and in a mess. As it carries on, halfway down page 273, it looks into the future of Louisa. We're told, here was Louisa on the night of the same day, watching the fire as in days of yore, though with a gentler and a humbler face, how much of the future might arise before her vision. So there's a sense of inevitability there, that Louisa's youth is sort of wasted and he's gone. She's still staring at the fire. And this is what I mean about a lack of true resolution, you know. Louisa is sort of gentler and she's sort of happier, but just like with Gradgrind, she's never fully redeemed, and she ends by looking in the fire, and Dickens has her end by looking in the fire in the same way that she did as a young girl, showing how the mistakes of childhood can never really fully be put right. And then it moves on to Rachel. The final paragraph on page 273 is looking at Rachel. And we're told that she is passing to and fro at the set hours among the Coketown hands, a woman of pensive beauty, always dressed in black, but sweet-tempered and serene, and even cheerful. So ultimately, she's in black, she's serene, but she's just part of these Coketown hands. She's just blended back into the background. She's become anonymous. Again, it's another silenced woman. It's another woman who's forced back into the crowd. Stephen made the point that the hands live and die as being anonymous, basically, and Rachel shows that. Interestingly, Dickens adds, who of all the people in the place alone appeared to have compassion on a degraded drunken wretch of her own sex, who was sometimes seen in the town secretly begging of her. Now that's Stephen's wife. That's Stephen's, well, widow now. And so she's still around, and it's a really ambiguous moment. Is Dickens suggesting there that Rachel will never be rid of her, so Rachel and Stephen can never themselves have that resolution? Or is Dickens saying what I prefer to be the reading of it, that actually that's what makes Rachel serene, that's what makes Rachel better than the other hands, that's what makes her stand out. The fact that she cares for someone else who doesn't deserve it is what sets her apart and ultimately gives her some sort of redemption. So it's entirely ambiguous here. Is Rachel just a face in the crowd who is condemned to have to look after this woman who she should be free of? Or actually is it more positive? Is Dickens saying caring for each other is what makes her life worthwhile and what makes her stand out from the hands? And then on page 274, the second paragraph, it carries on with Louisa. We're told herself again, a wife, a mother, lovingly watchful of her children, ever careful that they should have a childhood of the mind, no less than a childhood of the body, and knowing it to be even a more beautiful thing than a possession, any hoarded scrap of which is a blessing and happiness to the wisest. Did Louisa see this? So Dickens there again hints at this real redemption for Louisa, and we think, okay, yeah, so maybe she, her youth is gone, but through her own children she can be redeemed, and children and childhood innocence is the answer and the thing that we need to get back to. Dickens gives us that kind of hope, and then the final line, such a thing was never to be. So Dickens gives us that image and then says, actually, no, that's not going to happen. He snatches it away. And it's very much like Brian in Atonement, who gives us the happy ending and says, actually, no, that didn't happen. The lovers ultimately died. Same thing going on here. Dickens doesn't want this to be a full redemption. I don't think he wants anybody to be complacent, and I don't think he wants this fairy tale ending. It's a realistic novel about the society at the time, and it's not as neat as that. He's not saying, that there's a single answer. He's saying just bit by bit with compassion we need to sort of banish this spectre of utilitarianism. Paragraph after, we're told, but happy Sissy's happy children loving her, all children loving her, she grown learned in childish lore, thinking no innocent and pretty fancy ever to be despised. And it continues to describe Sissy and how Sissy, as the one woman who isn't silenced, who isn't made anonymous, is the one who brings redemption. It's shown with the repetition of happy. Dickens says, happy Sissy's happy children, showing how her happiness has shone on to her children and added that innocence. And the great line there, she grown learned in childish lore. Great technique by Dickens there. Remember, it opens at a school, and Gradgrind's philosophy of teaching. So the grown learned, we've been told about Sissy's progress in book 1, we've been told about how children need to learn. Sissy at the end is grown learned. Dickens returns to the same theme. But whereas it was all about emptiness in chapter 1, it was about the vault of the schoolroom and the fact that actually whatever these kids have learned, there's something missing inside them. Here, she's learned, but what she learned in childish lore. Dickens is sort of making the point, really, that the only learning we ultimately need is to be natural, to be true to ourselves and be like children. And ultimately, for Sissy's progress to work and to have an impact on others, that's why it's through that, it's through that childishness, through that innocence. And then Dickens ends the novel on a really didactic tone. He gives us a clear message. He ends by saying, dear reader. He addresses us directly, breaks out of that omniscient narrator, and actually gives us a direct sort of message straight through the pages, straight to the reader. Dear reader, it rests with you and me, whether in our two fields of action similar things shall be or not. Okay, let it be is the key motif of the novel, and here it's, well, we can let it be, or we cannot let it be. It's our choice. He throws it over to us. Let them be. We shall sit with lighter bosom on the hearth to see the ashes of our fires turn grey and cold. And again, it's that really ambiguous note. Dickens seems to be implying at the end that all of us, all of our ashes will turn grey and cold. All of us will lose childhood, will lose innocence eventually. It's going to happen to all of us. But we'll do it with lighter bosoms. Just like Louisa, we'll be able to accept it and we'll be much happier. So Dickens ultimately has changed the meaning of laissez-faire, of leave it alone, to let children be alone, let things happen, let childhood be innocent, let childhood be natural, just like it is for Sissy's children. And with that really sort of interesting ending where he's saying, ultimately, there's nothing you can do, childhood innocence will end, maybe revolutions will come, maybe things are due to get worse, but all we can do is do what Rachel does and approach it with compassion and with innocence and almost with childishness, and then things will be a little bit better. It's not a total redemption, it's not a perfect solution, but it seems to be what Dickens is suggesting is the best answer of all. After the sort of false message and false promise of utilitarianism, he's saying let's abandon that and let's do something that just feels more right and just feels more human. So that is Hard Times.